Hi, I'm Brian from Simply Brian Enterprises, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be looking at the homework solution for TopTechBoy's Raspberry Pi class, lesson number 14. Lesson number 14 is a follow-on to lesson 12 and 13, where we use the push buttons to control an RGB LED via PWM to control the brightness and then mix colors. This week's lesson is just taking it a step further. We're going to use those RGB values to write out into vPython and make a virtual LED appear on the screen. As usual, we're going to look at the hardware first, run the program, and then we'll take a look at the code. The hardware is unchanged from week to week. I've still got my 3 Paul shirt buttons. I've got my RGB LED and my Cat Talk button to gracefully exit the program and clear the status. And so we're going to go ahead here and run the program. Now, I'm not an expert in vPython, and I don't have time to become an expert in vPython. So my LED simulation is quite unimpressive, especially compared to Wild Bill and some of the other folks who've really done a good job with vPython. I'm just putting a simple sphere on the screen and controlling the colors with the push buttons. So I'm going to add a little bit of red. And you'll notice on the screen on the left, I'm still outputting the RGB value. Every time I press a button to make a change, I'm outputting the new RGB value so I can track what's going on. And I've tried to get my studio lighting satisfactory here, but my goal really was to align the color that you see in vPython with the color that's produced by the RGB LED. And here in real life, in person, as I'm looking at the board, they are very, very close. And so I tried to capture that with my studio lighting. It's a little off. Unfortunately, the camera doesn't quite capture it as clearly as it is, but it actually is a very accurate representation. This shows a lot brighter purple. There's my finger. This shows a lot brighter purple than what's being demonstrated in vPython, but as I look at it with the human eye, it's almost spot on. So I'm really happy with the results. And there's basically, that's going to be a little tough to come through. That looks more purplish in real life, not light gray. We can't really do light gray on an RGB LED, so some of the colors don't represent as well, but for the most part, it's pretty close. And I'm going to go ahead and just exit my program. Too much cat talk, you're meowed. And I'm going to close this out. Sometimes I get an error with vPython. I didn't that time, thankfully. And now we're going to go look at the code. So if you recall from lesson number 12, I did some pretty extensive code to adjust my color values with the buttons. And my hope was that in future lessons that would pay dividends in basically being able to write less code. And in lesson 14, it certainly has, because all I've done is I've taken my lesson 12 code and I've added 3 lines to it. Up at the very top, I'm doing my import vPython line. And then I'm coming down here. Before I get into the while loop and I'm actually changing values, I'm setting up my vPython sphere with a color value of all zeros. And then every time through the loop, if you remember, I always write out the LED status every time through the loop, whether it's changing or not. I do the same with vPython. Every single time through the loop, I'm setting the color to whatever the current value is. Now, when we're setting colors in vPython, we need to use vectors, and the vectors are using a value between 0 and 1. So if I have an RGB value that's 0 to 255, I need to divide that by 255 into a float to get the proper decimal value. So if you think about red full bright is 255, so 255 divided by 255 is 1. So that's a full bright red, that matches. Half bright would be 255 divided by 128, which is roughly 0.5. That matches. And so you get the idea. All I've done is I've taken the red value divided by 255 into a float, and that's my first value in the vector. And then I proceed on to do green and blue as well. And that's it. That's the only difference between lesson 12 and 14. The vPython magic takes care of the rest. Hope you've enjoyed this, hopefully short explanation of what I've done for lesson 14. Really looking forward to lesson 15 next week, being able to do analog inputs on the Raspberry Pi. If you like my videos, be sure to like and subscribe below. Leave a comment if you have thoughts on vPython or anything else. and I look forward to seeing you later. From Brian from Simply Brian Enterprises, thank you for watching.